Welcome everybody. In this video we're going to be talking about Mylands satin paint. It's the plant-based multi-surface paint, but on top of that I'm going to be talking about the difference between opacity and coverage, and generally I want to be talking about what paints are like for opacity and what you've got to be looking for. So I think if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about opacity, coverage, and particularly Mylands paints, which are brilliant by the way, I will say that, please keep watching. I think you'll find this video very enjoyable. Hopefully you'll learn something. Welcome everybody, welcome to the channel. Phil Beckwith, the professional painter and decorator, and back in the studio. You know what? I like to be in my studio. It's my happy place. Let's call it my happy place. We're back with Doris the door, and you've seen the thumbnail, you've probably seen the title, you're a little bit intrigued with what we're going to be doing. We're back on with the Mylands paint. Now we're back on with the Mylands plant-based multi-surface paint, and it is a satin finish. Now previously you've probably seen a video where I was coating up Doris the door with the eggshell finish. That tin of paint that I had, I purchased from West Bridgford Crown Decorator Centre. That litre tin cost me as good as £38. Now, since then, and since actually getting that tin of paint and making that video, Ronnie at Mylands has reached out to me and said, Phil, I think you need to try some of the other paints out. And if you've seen a few videos on the Mylands, it's because I've got some sample tins of paint to try out. So no sponsorship, no endorsements, nothing like that, no paid promotion, no paid anything. It's just I've got some sample paints to try out to test firsthand, and obviously just tell anybody who's watching this video what the paint's like. Now, so far so good with what I've tried with Mylands. Now, you'll see the door there. That is now coated up in the Mylands eggshell. Not a bad finish at all. I'm going to go for a satin finish this time in white, and the whole purpose of this video is, one, to test out the paint, see what it's like, what do I think of it, how does it go on, what's the application like, blah de blah de blah. But also I just want to touch on opacity, coverage, two different things, and I've probably spoke about this before. Opacity is when you get a paint and it's all to do with how that paint, I don't want to say covers because coverage is something different, but if I say to you opacity, I want to know whether that paint will go over a darker colour and how many coats it will take to cover a certain colour, any colour, darker colour, something different. So that's your opacity, and your coverage is really, if I've got a litre tin, it's going to cover 20 square metres. That's what coverage is. But I think people get a bit confused with the coverage and opacity. And if I say to you, a paint's not covered, it's not covered very well over another paint, I think the real word is opacity. So we're going to be touching on that on this video, and I'm going to mention it now. You're seeing Doris the door painted in that creamy colour. I think it's, what was the colour called? It was called Kensington Rose in the eggshell. A little bit of a creamy colour. I don't know whether you can see it there. Since doing that video, I've actually used Doris the door for another video, and I'll tell you what, I'm stand there, I'm going to put a video just there of what that door was like prior to it looking like this. It's a previous video just a few weeks back. Different colours, and I've gone to repaint Doris back with that eggshell paint, so I've got an even door all in one colour. Now I'm going to say to you now, those greens that you saw on that video there, with that Mylands eggshell, I've given it 4 coats to get it to where I am now. And if I said to you, it's not 100%, it could probably benefit from a 5th coat. We are now talking about the opacity of a paint's not fantastic. Now Mylands paint pride themselves on having high pigmentation, good opacity, but I'm going to say now, and being honest, if that's taking 5 coats of paint to cover those greens, is that good or bad? I know it's bad because time is money, but would I say to you as a professional painter and decorator, when you are going over darker colours or colours that aren't very similar, expect to be using extra coats? There's some people that are shouting at the screen now saying, Phil, but if you'd have used oil undercoat and an oil eggshell and 2 coats of that, this, that and the other, I know, but we're now into 2025 and we are working, particularly Phil Beckwith, the professional painter and decorator, I'm working with water-based paints. So to get this door all evenly coated up, so I've got a base for this paint that I'm going to be trying, which is the Satin in white. I've given that 4 coats to bring it up to the standard that's below, you know, from that video there. And I could possibly look at it, look round the mouldings and go, a little bit grinny, could it benefit from an extra? Yes, it could. So that would be 5 coats. Not fantastic. I am not saying that Mylands paint's rubbish, far from it, because the finish, the feel, the application of Mylands is spot on. One of the best paints I've tried in a long while. But just be mindful of opacity. Opacity and coverage are 2 different things, and to get a paint to cover is to do with the opacity, and I've done 4 coats. Moving on from that, right, where are we today? I've got the paint out, I've got white, and this is where I'm going to come in and say we're going to see what the opacity of Mylands white satin is, going over a Mylands eggshell, which will be a good base to go over. I've gave it a nib down. It's a good base to go over. We've got a cream colour, and I want to see what the opacity of the white is like, and if I can coat this door up in 2 coats and say that it is covered, i.e. the opacity has obliterated all that cream, where I've got a winning paint. So I'm going to just move the camera around, get you in a bit closer. I'll try and keep this video under the 20 minutes, but I've got to talk to you, so it will be a little bit of a lengthy chin wag. But let's just see what this paint's like, and let's move the camera now. Okay. I'm not going to subject you to painting all that door. If you want to watch me painting doors, I have plenty of videos where I'm actually showing you how to paint a door. But just briefly, make sure you do the moulding first, do the panel, work your way round, and then you bring these sections in, the rails, and then come down with the stiles. If you are doing a door that's opening and closing into a room, it depends whether you do the side, which is the hinge edge, or the latch edge, lock edge first. Done. But where I am today is I've got my paint kettle, one of the Eco paint kettles. I'm going to go with the Maverick brush that I've used recently. Very nice soft bristle. There's a video I've got somewhere about Maverick brushes. It's a lovely soft bristle for applying water-based paints, and it lays off nicely. So I've just bedded the brush in. On the instructions of the brush, if you can have instructions on a brush, it does mention sometimes it's better to wash it out. I find it, just bed it in with your paint and you're all right. Loaded it up. This is the first coat, so we don't have to be too critical. Application of that, as I'm just brushing it, is very, very smooth. It goes over that eggshell, no issues whatsoever. The eggshell is not a dry eggshell. It is actually a very nice sheened eggshell. Now I'm just going around those mouldings, bringing it across the face, putting it on, bit crow's nest, lay it off with the tips of the bristles, wipe your brush down, tips of the bristles again, just gently take your brush marks off the surface. Edges of your panel, knock off any fatty edges because they're the bits that's going to dry. Now hopefully, I'm just looking at the camera, that doesn't look too bad. There's a little bit of brush marky grinniness which I would probably expect off the first coat of paint, but hopefully when that dries and we come back later, touch dries an hour, recoat time, if I say err on the side of caution, 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours would probably be better to recoat. And as I am I'm just looking, I'm not saying we're losing the light outside, but I'm doing this at the back end of the day. I'm going to come back and give this a second coat tomorrow morning, so it will be nicely dry. But so far so good. You know what I'm like? Can you see that? Got to sniff the bristle. There's a lovely smell to that paint. Just a brief history of Mylands. You've probably heard me before. 1884, John Mylands set up the company doing paints and varnishes. They've had connections with the film and theatre industry for over 100 years now, and they've had the royal warrant since 1985. Dominic Myland is head of Mylands Paints now, so family run business, and they are in London. So it is a proper family UK English based company producing paints, and you might never even heard of them. If you want to get hold of Mylands Paints, you can buy it online, and you can obviously get it through places like Crown Decorators Centre. I would think you'd probably get it through brewers and good reputable outlets like that who are independent as well. So let me crack on. I'm liking how this is applying. I want to see what the sheen level's like when it dries. I'm hoping this is a decent sheen level, because I do like a satin finish that's got something that you can actually see. We've tried the gloss, we've tried the eggshell, we're now trying the satin. So thank you, Ronnie, for sending this to me. I'm going to see everybody once I've got 2 coats on tomorrow, and you'll probably see a little bit of back roll B footage of what this is like when it's dry as well in between. So catch you later, alligators. Morning everybody, we're all good. I don't know, I'm going to say about 18 hours in since you last saw me after coating that up. Now, I'm going to be honest, I came in about 3-4 hours later. It was about dry, but I thought I'd give it a proper day, well, next day to dry off. I was looking at it, and this video's, we're talking about the Mylands paint, but we are also talking about opacity and coverage, and we're talking about just general paints with their opacity. Now, looking at this Mylands paint with opacity, I can see through that paint after this first coat, and I'm still seeing that bit of a cream from the eggshell from before. Now, when I was looking last night, I actually doubted myself whether the colour I was putting on was actually white, and I had to go back to my paint tub, and if I can just drop down that, hopefully, there you go, turn it round, you can actually see it being a white paint in my tub. So I know I was putting white on and I wasn't going mad, but I'm talking about the opacity. Mylands paint's supposed to be highly pigmented, which would give you the body to get opacity. Now, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, I'm going like that. I'm hoping that this will cover with a second, and when I say cover, I'm on about the opacity for obliterating anything that was underneath that first coat, and I've got body with that second coat that it actually looks solid, and that's what we're talking about with opacity when we talk about how it covers. Coverage is something totally different. Coverage is, I've got a little tin of paint, and you know what, I can paint all that wall with it. That's why when you look on the back of paint tins, it says how far you should be able to get with a set quantity of paint. So coverage is how far you can actually go over a surface, depending on the surface you go over. If it's something really porous, it's going to take it in, you're going to need more paint to cover an area. But opacity is different to actually coverage. But when I'm trying to explain to you, and I'll say, has it covered, we are actually then talking about the opacity. And looking at that, for that first coat over that cream, this white is a little bit suspect. I am going to say, I hope that the body of this paint is enough that the second coat will just body up, and it will give me that opacity stroke cover to blank out what was underneath it. Now, I know if we're going to be talking about darker colours, and we've had this before, if we've got darker colours underneath, you're going to be knowing that you're going to be giving it an extra coat. And I would actually say, if Mylands have got an undercoat stroke primer, which they do, it might be beneficial to be going over a suspect colour, because it might be a different colour to what you're going over with, it might be beneficial to use the undercoat because there might be more pigmentation, body, opacity to an undercoat to help get that blanking out you need to put your top coats over the top. But we're saying this is an MSP paint. This will go over virtually any surface without that need for an undercoat. But I think if it's between you and me, I'm going to say if you know you're going over a colour or a white that's a little bit darker, i.e. it's an off-white, and you don't think it's going to be getting that opacity cover, go with an undercoat. So I'm going to coat this up, going to get the heater on, I'm going to see in a few hours, and we'll see whether we've got that opacity and has it covered. And when I say cover, has it actually obliterated the underlying paint surface that we have a solid finish. But I will say I'm liking the application. The drying is really good. The finish is feeling lovely, and there is a little bit more sheen to that satin than we had with the eggshell. So I spoke for 5 minutes, and do you know what? I'm going to get cracking on. I'm going to see you later on. You know how I like to talk, but I do like to explain things and get the information over to you as much as I possibly can. Catch you later, alligator. I'm back after a few hours. We coated that door up. I'm going to say now, what a lovely drop of paint that is. The application, I keep going on, the application, the brushing out, the laying off, particularly with a softer bristled brush like that Maverick Series S with that spiral bristle. You can see that there. The paint goes on lovely. I'm looking at that second coat, which is, we're a white paint and it's gone over that creamy colour, which was the eggshell. And do you know what? If I look really closely, I would say I need to give it another coat. It needs 3 coats, which would then come in line with what I've said for a long while about water-based paints. Primer undercoat, normally they're an all-in-one paint. Primer undercoat and 2 top coats. Are we asking a lot for a paint that is classed as an MSP paint to go for 2 coats over surfaces, particularly surfaces that are a different colour to what you're putting on? If we were going over a white eggshell, a white Mylands eggshell, a white anybody's eggshell, a white gloss of anybody else's, and we'd rubbed it down, and we were going over with this satin, would I be getting it to cover for 2? I think you won't have any problem because you're doing a white on white. The problem comes with that opacity of paints, particularly light coloured paints. Put that down before I hit you with it. Particularly lighter coloured paints, the off-whites, the whites, the brilliant whites, the pure whites, whatever you want to call it as a white, even your lighter creams, opacity, body of that paint doesn't always give us that hiding power to stop things showing through. Has it covered? Not coverage, has it covered? If you look at that door, a blind man on a galloping horse is going to say, Phil, it looks fine. But do you know me as the professional that's applied it? I look around the mouldings, and this is one of the reasons why I do a Doris the door that's got rounded mouldings. We've got flats. It's a textured door. It is quite critical to show up paint, not problems, but imperfections in the actual paint makeup, because something that's grinning is going to show on mouldings. Now I'm looking sideways on across that panel. I can see brush marquee, a drag effect, and those that know what dragging is, it's something from the 80s and 90s, go back whatever. You used to get furniture, bedroom furniture done in a drag, and it was a case that you'd have a background colour and you'd have another pigmented glaze colour, and you would do a hand drag. I can do it. This is what I used to teach at college. You'd used to do a hand drag to get a dragged brush effect, a little bit like graining. Now I'm looking across these panels and I can see a little bit of, it looks like a brush mark drag effect. Now, we could put that down to the actual brushing laying off. It's just giving you a little bit of an optical illusion from the lights above. And I've got studio lights here making me look beautiful. But I just feel, you know, if I gave it another coat, I'd feel a lot happier. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to jump and say, first off, if you were doing a colour that's light, go with your primer undercoat and then go with your two top coats. I know it's 3-coat process, but I would say that the primer undercoat would have the guts and the body to obliterate, to give good opacity, because it's normally a flatter paint. There's not the glaziness to it to give a sheen. Your undercoats have more opacity than top coats. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to give you an example, and I'm looking at my stands behind me. Caprol Half Primer is a prime example of a good obliterating, good opacity undercoat. It's a grip primer, half meaning grip in German. That is a good base to put your 2 top coats on over the top. And I've used, if I go like that, there's a Caprol playlist just there where I've used the paints before. That is a good primer stroke undercoat which acts as your base for any subsequent coats. Likewise, Mylands do have undercoats, because I am looking, I've used the Mylands undercoat in a grey when I did the black gloss. So I would say if you are using a Mylands Satin MSP, the multi-surface paint, going over a paint colour surface that you are a little bit suspect with, i.e. it's not the same colour as what you're going over with the white, I would say go for your undercoat. Get it, it's still a plant-based, which means it's made up of the, it's made up in the style of what paints used to be made up like. Oh, I don't know the ins and outs of that. But it is a primer and undercoat, and it's a multi-surface interior exterior undercoat. I would tell you, if you are using the Mylands, go with the undercoat to get that opacity, that coverage, that obliteration over that surface that you're trying to paint out. And I'll say again, coverage is something to do with how far a bit of paint does, i.e. 100mm of paint will do that door because it's got good coverage. But we also say about covering power, which is actually the opacity. I would say the primer undercoats will give you that opacity to blank out what you're going over to give you 2 top coats over the top. And on that note, I'm going to say it's still worth a paint to try. It's still very much a good paint. The satin finish on that I'm quite happy with. I would like to see a little bit more of a sheen level. I'm not sure what this sheen level's coming in at. Somebody might know. Is it around about 40%? But it's just lacking that body in the paint to try and obliterate, to give opacity for a surface that might not be the colour that you're actually going over with to match it. If you're going over white, you'll have no problem. But other than that, we're looking quite good. And for proof in the pudding, I've taped up there. That section of the door panel there is 1 coat. Everything around it is 2. I'm going to actually probably input video just there of a close-up of that so you can see it and see what you think. That was 1 coat. This is 2 coats. On that note, I'm going to say please watch the videos at the end. Again, people who are giving me super thanks, it's much appreciated. We've had a bit of a spike in super thanks and buy me a coffee recently, which is brilliant because it helps to keep this channel going. Without people like you that's doing that, I've got to be honest, I don't make a lot out of YouTube when you start looking at how much time goes into it. And that'll be on another video. We'll talk about on another video in the future. But don't think I'm rolling in YouTube earnings through doing videos like this. It doesn't work like that. But I love doing it. And I'll see you on the next one. Catch you later.